just have a question just on that. So you've gone and come back. What specifically did you learn outside that you are applying in government today?
Firstly, there are a number of things that you learn which you can't really apply immediately. You know, there are a lot of, for instance, I mean, one of the basic tenets of some of these organizations is work-life balance. You know, here in India there is no concept of work-life balance, especially in government. And as Varad will tell you now, he has to leave at 3 o'clock because he has to attend office. But these organizations, and I don't know whether that's true for the private sector in the Western countries, but certainly in the multilateral and bilateral agencies, there's a work-life balance. But that besides, I think that's a minor point. I think more important is the professional way how the employees' performances are judged. I think here in our system we find that it's a very routine kind of way. But there, it's very intensive, it's very open, it's very consultative, and that's something which we still haven't, and which is something which is not at my level. So your question of what have you implemented, I would say that's something which I would love to implement. But being in what positions you are, there are certain things that you cannot take on yourself. I think that's one of the things about government where you work in a hierarchy, and you may be working only in a particular department. For instance, I'm working in the Ministry of Finance. And if I want to do something about the performance appraisal systems in the bureaucracy, I don't think I'm the right person to, and I don't think I have that legitimate right to try and influence that from where I am.
You know, just building on that, 3 of the 4 of you are IAS officers, but you're not. By the way, 100% of the people out there, maybe 95%, maybe all of them, are actually not IAS officers. So I guess just building on where Gurpreet was going, what is it that, first of all, got you the role? And more importantly, as you come in with your ideas, you've been a former consultant, and you're not an IAS officer, what have you had to do differently in order to succeed in what you do?
So first of all, thank you for having us here. It's a great pleasure to be here. And Shanthan, you introduced the group as a group of young people and the panelists as a panelist of eminent people. I would much rather have the other adjective used upon us as well. Because I think by government standards, I think we all are quite young. So to your question, Lakshmanji, the space in which I am right now is obviously a very small space. There isn't that much of an opportunity to work directly in government at the level of helping a minister. So the first thing I'd say is that one should not restrict one's horizons to working only in government, because there are various opportunities you have to influence the way the government does things and what the government does. Working for a minister or in a ministry is just one of those ways. I think it's been mentioned that some of you are working with members of parliament. Progressive members of parliament are today much more open to having young people work for them, give them fresh ideas, you know, increase their stature in parliament, which is also important for them. So that's the second way. The third, of course, is through influential think tanks or consulting firms who also, you know, make a big impact on what the governments do. Of course, often it's a question of how their recommendations are packaged and you know, whether they can communicate it effectively and understand the political constraints in which they have to be implemented. So that's sort of a third way. And the fourth, of course, is, you know, as an advocate or an activist, I think you can also make a big difference. Being in the Ministry of Environment, we sort of face this every day. You know, we get about 200 or 300 letters addressed to the minister on a regular basis, from ranging on topics from certain environmental clearances which have been wrongly given, to a tiger being killed in a particular tiger reserve, you know, all sorts of issues. And I wouldn't say we are able to act on all of them, but on a number of them we are able to take action. And one of my observations from my limited time in government is that, you know, we always talk about the failure of our ability to implement. We have good policies but not unable to implement it. But I think we can use activists and civil society and citizens as very effective citizen monitors of what we are doing and what can be done better. So there are different ways in which you can engage with the government. In my particular case, I guess I was lucky I have always been interested more from the political side of things, and I got in touch with my current boss, who at the time was running the Congress Party's election campaign. He was running the election control room. And I was fortunate in the sense that he was somebody who was willing to take a risk. Not that he knew me from before. And based on a short conversation, he sort of asked me to join and help him for the 3 months of the election campaign. And we got a good outcome, and then he got made a minister, and I decided to sort of continue with him. So I would say that there are sort of 2 or 3 things which have to come together for a role like mine to work out. One, as I said, you need someone who sees who's willing to see things differently. What I would call have a mindset of why not, as opposed to a mindset of why. So, willing to see that new people can bring new ideas, new ways of thinking, so that sort of mindset has to be there from the person you engage with. The second is your own willingness to take a risk, because, again, from my own experience, you don't have the opportunity to have long discussions on what my role will be, what my job responsibilities will be, who will I work with, how the kind of people I'll work with. That's sort of a chance you have to take. It may work out, it may not work out. But that's a chance you should be willing to take. It's not like the private sector recruitment cycle, which is very well structured. And then the third, of course, is your willingness to take financial sacrifice. And especially if you're locating from the private sector, or especially from abroad, then the sacrifice can be quite dramatic. Anything from 50% to 95% pay cut, which, for obvious reasons, we all should think a lot about before we do. So I think those 3 things need to fall in place for something like this to work out.
Can I ask a question to follow up on that?
Just to follow up on that, is there a certain temperament that one needs in order to succeed in the kind of role? Look, I mean, you spoke a bit about the hierarchy, about recognizing what you can and cannot influence. And Varad, I'm just curious, with your experience, I'm sure you intrinsically had that, but did you have to change anything in what you did and how you interacted with people so you could have impact?
Sure, I think there is there's a whole piece of your communication and interpersonal skills, which works very differently in government than it would work in a typical private sector corporate setup. Most importantly, I mean, as Mupit said, it is a hierarchical culture. There is a lot of respect you need to show to grey hair and to experience, put it in a different way. And
it's getting very confusing these days, particularly as I notice some people have hair issues. Go ahead, yeah.
So, although I work for the minister, my day-to-day work involves working a lot with the civil servants and senior civil servants, secretary, additional secretary, joint secretary to the government. And, if you want to interact with them in a productive way, the way to do it is to, show them the kind of respect that they, I wouldn't say they seek, but they deserve. And,
I think you're surrounded, so you don't have to
And I think that sort of, you need to get in that mode very quickly, because the age profile is different, the professional experience people are coming from is different, and if you need to work with them effectively, that's sort of a very important way to deal with it.
Shrikar, a question for you. You've got Nanda Nile